So, today we're going to be talking about Django CMS, how to create websites with Django CMS. If you were not in my presentation yesterday, my name is Paulo. I'm the current Django CMS lead developer. I work for a Swiss web agency called Divio. And yeah, I love hiking, so if you're going hiking on Monday, then let me know. Before I start, I'd like to do a quick show of hands. So, who here has used or heard of Django before? Ooh, very nice. How about heard of Django CMS before the talk? Okay, not as much. And used Django CMS. Okay, cool. I hope you guys find this talk useful. What is Django CMS? Django CMS is a content management system. It provides a custom interface for content editors, as well as a lot of integration options for developers, like quite a lot of options. And it's open source on GitHub. It's under the BSD license, which means you can modify it as you please, as long as you keep the license file. And just to clarify, Django CMS and Django are not the same thing. Django is a web framework, a framework to create web applications, and Django CMS is a web application to create websites built on Django. Right? So, big difference. Django CMS has been around for about 7 years, a bit over that. We've had consistent growth over the years, but as you can see in the past 4, we've done a lot of sprints to improve the core. And as we say, make content management great again. It's not as funny as it was before. And so in 2015, we won the People's Choice Award for Best Open Source CMS from CMS Critic. So that was pretty cool. And so who uses Django CMS? As you can see, Django CMS is used by big companies that handle a lot of traffic, manage a lot of content. So this is a really good, this makes us really proud, companies like this use it. Before I dive deep into all the components, I'm going to do a quick live demo because yesterday's went so well. So I'm going to talk about pages, which are a collection of content, and how this content is managed using placeholders and plugins through structure mode and content mode. Okay? So switching to Chrome. All right. So I've created this page here, and as you can see, there's just a bunch of dummy content, right? And if you look here on the top right, there's this little icon that when I press it, shows the toolbar, right? And from the toolbar, you can access all your pages. Now, this only shows up because I'm an administrator, I'm logged in, so it wouldn't show up if you're not logged in, right? And here you can see all the different pages I've created. I've got home, blog, events, a bunch of them. And from here you can see that for home, for example, I've got a German version, English, and then no French or Italian because I don't really know that. And you can also manage whether it's in the menu or not and other options. So from here you have this eye icon, which you can then click, and it will take you to a preview of the page, right? So it takes me back to the same home page I had before. And then I can switch to structure mode. From structure mode, you can see these are the content blocks or placeholders. I've got feature, content, footer, and footer theme, right? And for each placeholder, you have your plugins, right? So I can expand this, and I can see all the different plugins that are on the page. So if I switch back to content mode now, and let's say I want to change this text that says explore your limits, I press Shift Space, shows me where this content is in structure mode, and from there, I can modify it and say, hello, PyCaribbean, and save. Then that reloads, takes me back to structure mode, and then from here I can go back to content mode and see the text that has changed. Now, the big difference between structure mode and content mode is that structure mode lets you alter the architecture of the page. So as you can see here, you can move these plugins around You can add new plugins, delete plugins, do a bunch of things that will alter the architecture, you could say, of the site. But in content mode, you can only modify plugins that are already there. You cannot add plugins, and you cannot move them around. So in this case, if I were to want to change this text again, I can just double click here, brings up the same text, right? And say 2017. Save again, and then it just takes me back to content mode. So again, you can only modify plugins that are already there. So this is like a separation between people that do the architecture, you could say, of the page, and then the people that will actually edit the content. And so that was a quick demo. No issues. Wow. Okay, good. Let's talk about pages. So pages, they're powered by templates, right? And what does that mean? So as I mentioned before, you have your content blocks. These are the placeholders, right? A template, this is where you define the content blocks. This is where you define the placeholders. You would define a sidebar placeholder. You would define a footer, all sorts of placeholders. And when you create a page, you assign a template to the page. The CMS reads the template, and then this is how it knows where it provides you the places to add your plugins to. Then, as you saw before, pages support multiple translations. So you can add as many languages as you want, and it's all under the same page. It's just like different content for each page and different URL as well. And then any modification you make to a page will go to what we call the draft version of the page, right? So the changes I made just now, any change you make will go to the draft version of the page. And the only time that it goes live is if you were to publish the translation, right? Because content is per language. So I made my modifications in English, and so if I were to publish that English translation, then and only then will the changes affect the live version, right? And then you can nest pages, the same way as you might have seen I nested plugins, you can nest them. So I'm going to show you quickly what a template looks like. This is a template for one of the pages I showed before, and you can see here you've got placeholder tags, and these are the content blocks, right? And so from here, if we go back to the page I had before, those placeholder tags become what you're seeing here in structure mode, feature, content, and all that. And then if I go back to content mode and I switch to German, you'll see that the content has changed, right? Different language, so different content. And so, yeah. Now, going back to the presentation, when you nest pages, you gain a lot of different configuration options, and I'm going to cover those a bit in the next slides. But yeah, like nesting pages will give you a lot of control over different things. I'm going to talk about those. But first, I'd like to show, if I go back to the English version, if I look at the published version of this page, you'll see that it's the old text, the one that I had before. So if I go back to edit mode, it shows me the draft version. And from here, I can say publish page, and then it will copy all the content from the draft version into the live, and now this is live. So going back, placeholders. There is 3 types of placeholders. The first one is the one that you saw in the template. It's called a page placeholder. A page placeholder is bound to a page. It will only work in the context of a page. So for each page, the same placeholder will have different content. So if you have an about page and a theme page, and both have a sidebar placeholder, the content will be different each time. Which takes us to the static placeholder. A static placeholder retains its content. So basically, it's not bound to a page. It's not bound to anything. It's basically a placeholder that remains the same throughout the entire site. So this is very useful when you have things like a footer, where you don't necessarily want to modify the content. Like the content doesn't change depending on the page. It's always the same footer. And if you modify it from the home page, you want it to affect the other pages. So this is where the static placeholder would come in. And then app placeholders, it's a placeholder that's bound to a generic object. So it's a placeholder that is not declared through the template. It's declared manually from your model SPY. but I'm going to talk about that later in application integration. So going back to Chrome, and here. So if we look here, you can see footer is a static placeholder because of the little pin there. So this is how I know that this content will remain constant throughout the whole site. And I can change it from here, and then it will affect the others. Right. And you can configure placeholders through a setting called CMS Placeholder Cone. So if I switch to this page here, right, this page is using the placeholder I showed before as page_hero unit. And that's not necessarily a very human-readable name, right? I want to call it something else. So I can always go to the placeholder conf. And yeah, this is more like for, content managers wouldn't do this, right? So I can say page hero unit and name equals hero unit. Save, wait for my server to restart because I made a change, and then reload. And as you can see, the text changed. So like that, you can do a bunch of different things. You can limit how many plugins are added to a placeholder. You can limit which types of plugins, because there's a bunch, like text, image, video. There's a ton you can do like that. And then placeholders support inheritance. So this is one of those things I mentioned would be enabled if you were to use page inheritance. So I have this parent page, and then I have this child page. And if I look at the published version of this child page, there's no content, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add content to the parent page of the child. I'm just going to copy all of these and hope that it works. Go back to the parent, and I'm going to paste them here on hero unit. And now I'm going to go back to that same placeholder and say inherit. And I need to restart server because I'm using the cache template loader. If you were in my talk yesterday, you would know. So now I'm going to publish this page. Publish, publish, publish. And if I look at this child page again, it's inheriting the content. So this is available through nesting of pages. Placeholders can inherit their content. But if I go back to edit mode here, you'll see that there is no content on child. This is because I can override any inherited content, but I cannot modify it through the child. I can modify it only through the root, in this case, the parent page. So going back. Plugins. As you saw, plugins can be nested. You can cut them, copy, move them around, and they're language aware. So when I showed the English page and the German page, pages, they're aware of language, but placeholders are not. Placeholders know nothing of languages. Plugins do. So when you have a plugin in English, like here, these plugins are all different instances, like completely different database records than the ones in German. And each plugin will store the language that it belongs to. So this is how you can see different content depending on what language you're on. But the placeholders themselves don't know anything about languages. And so I'm going to show a quick example. I'm going to move this plugin here. I have this cow, right? And I'm going to move this cow that way. So again, I can use Shift, space. Now I know where the cow is. It's this one here. And it's part of a grid system. So I'm going to go ahead and move the column up. And now I go back to content mode, and the cow is there, right? So that's an example of how plugins can be moved around throughout the whole structure mode. But this wouldn't be able to be done in content mode, right? And the cow is also an example of a custom plugin. So we provide, like we have a whole ecosystem of plugins, like text, video, image, but you can have your own customized plugins. This is an application, a third-party application that provides you with profiles for people profiles. So I created a profile for the cow, and then I created a custom plugin that just renders the cow, like just renders a list of profiles, and this is why we see this here. So like that, you can create any type of plugin, a plugin that renders a form, any type of plugin. And menus. Okay, so the menus are fully dynamic. What this means is that you don't have to hard code the navigation anywhere. Basically, if we go back to the page list, and here, we have a little checkbox there to tell the CMS if this page should show up on the menu or not. So if you look here, I have this events, and I don't want events to show up in the menu, so I'm just going to go ahead and remove it from there. And you can see it's no longer there. So there is no hard coding anywhere. Like, the menu is fully generated from the pages. And the way it works is that the menu is composed of navigation nodes. These navigation nodes have a title, a URL, and an identifier. So we basically fetch all the pages and create navigation nodes for all of them. And menus can also be customized using what we call modifiers. So a modifier would basically take a list of nodes, navigation nodes, and you can set attributes to them based on certain conditions. So for example, if I have nodes in my navigation that start with a B, like the title starts with a B, right? Like blog, I can say, well, every node that starts with a B is going to have a B icon, like PyViewer. And so I would set the icon on the navigation node, and when the template that renders the nodes is called, I can just say, if this icon is available, render the icon. And so whenever the navigation node would render, like blog, it would have a customized icon, right? So that would be an example of modifiers. You can also have your own custom menu. Like, you can create your own nodes. But this is something I'm going to cover in application integration. Okay. Permissions. Django gives you permission, like when you create a model in Django, you automatically get permissions to add, change, and delete, right? There's no read permission. And another limitation is I cannot say, well, only Evil Bob can only change the blog. He can only touch the blog. I don't want him to touch the home page or any other page. I cannot do that with Django permissions, at least not the ones out of the box, because there is no concept of row-level permissions. There's only like object-level permissions, like the entire model. So it would have to be Bob can edit all the pages or he can edit none. So we created a permission system that allows for, first of all, it introduces reading. So you can restrict whether a page is accessible by certain users, right? So there is reading. And then there is object-level permissions. And there is also global as well. So you can say now that Bob can only modify the blog page, but he cannot modify anything else. And the cool thing is that when you inherit pages, like the parent page I got there, you also open the door to inheritance of permissions. So imagine if you've got multiple divisions in your company, you've got a science one, a business one, and you have a science page, which is like the home page, let's say, for the science division, and you've got a business one. Any page that's under science, you can say that all pages under science will inherit the permissions of the science page, and then just say that all the users that have the science group can access that page and edit it, but they cannot edit the business one. So this is how permissions can be inherited. And last, there is like a more nuclear option, which is a configuration in the settings where you can say that the entire installation is accessible only by staff members. So this is more for if you're trying to create like an intranet, for example. The entire installation is closed off and can only be accessed by administrators. Now, the CMS has different levels of caching. The first one is page cache. Basically, it's very straightforward. The CMS renders a page and grabs the entire rendered content, throws it into the cache. The next time the page is called, it just fetches from the cache and just renders that, right? And then there is more granular, like placeholder level cache. So as you saw, you can cache at the content block level. And then there is menus cache. The menus is like one of the most expensive things on the CMS. Like, it's really expensive to generate that menu. So we highly recommend to have caching enabled for that. You can configure the durations of the menu there, and you can also turn off page cache, placeholder cache. And then there's a gotcha with plugins. We don't support plugin level caching yet. So what that means is, imagine if you've got a plugin that renders a form, and this form has a CAPTCHA, right? So then the CMS caches the entire placeholder. And so when another user comes in and they submit the CAPTCHA, it doesn't work. It throws a validation error because it's the CAPTCHA that was cached when another user came in, right? So then that would cause a problem. So the only thing you can do is you can turn off caching. You can turn it off entirely for a plugin. So I can say, this plugin that renders a form, don't cache it at all. And so what the CMS will do is, whenever it sees that plugin in any placeholder, it turns off caching for the entire placeholder. So that is a trap, right? Because you then, if you have 300 plugins in one placeholder, which happens a lot, you would have to make sure to put your form in a different one, in a different placeholder, so that it doesn't cache that one, but it caches the other plugins. And this is a true story of something that happened to me, where we deployed a site and we had like random validation errors out of nowhere, and it took me a week to figure out that it was because the CAPTCHA was being cached. So that was awful. And wow, I've gone quite fast. Applications, the famous application integration. So imagine if you've got this, you're creating a blog, right? And your blog model, you create an article model, and it has a title, a slug, and content. And your content field is a text field with a WYSIWYG widget on it, right? And your content manager is adding articles, and they're like, you know, we have all these cool plugins in other places. Like, I can add content using all these cool plugins, but why can I not use these plugins for the article? Like, I would really like to use images, videos, and all sorts of things for the article, right? So you can do it using a custom placeholder field. Like, the CMS provides a custom field called placeholder field, which basically lets you leverage the entire placeholder plugin system from your model. So you would basically, let me show you how we do that. If I go to blog, and I have here a blog article, switch to structure mode, you can see I have this newsblog article content placeholder. This placeholder is not defined in the template. It's not defined anywhere but the placeholder, the model definition. So switching to the model, it's this. I have a content equals placeholder field. So it's a field, it's a placeholder field. So it allows you to bring in any plugin that you want. So then the content managers will be able to build articles with any of the available plugins from the entire site. So that is pretty cool. And then there is the option of menu integration, right? So if I switch back here, if you noticed, and I should have reloaded because I tested this there. Okay. There. There's no breadcrumb. I have home, but there is no blog. There is no a shift and reef, right? If I go back to the blog page, there is home blog, but there is no breadcrumb for a shift and reef. That is because a shift and reef is an article. It's not a page. And the CMS doesn't know about this article, like has no clue of what this is, because this is a third-party application, nothing to do with the CMS. So what you can do is you can create a custom menu that basically tells the CMS what these articles are, and then the CMS can create a navigation for it. And that looks like this. Basically, fetch all the articles, and for each article, create a navigation node. Title, URL, ID, and then you can go to your blog page, go to the advanced settings, and just attach a menu to the page, right? So I'm going to attach this test menu that I created. Reload. And now if I reload this article, you're going to see there is a breadcrumb now. This is because the CMS now knows what this is, and it's smart enough to match the URL to the current article. So that's an option. If you're building third-party applications and you want to integrate with the CMS, you can create custom menu for them. And last, there is app hooks. App hooks is like a very advanced thing, so I'm not really going to go like super deep into it. But basically, the way the blog works is using the app hooks feature. So imagine if you've got you have a blog, right? And it's a third-party application. And you want to manage the blog page through the CMS, but your blog application has its own logic that handles the slug when you access like this, a shifting reef, right? It has its own view, its own URLs, its own logic. But you want to manage the page through the CMS, like I have it here, blog. So the way you would do it is you create what we call an app hook, which basically hooks the CMS, a CMS page to your third-party application. And so when the CMS hits the blog page, it's kind of like a proxy. It looks at the blog page and it says, I have an app hook, and it just passes the rendering of the page to your application. So then you can do things like the blog landing page and handle article detail pages without, like, it doesn't have to be in the CMS core. You can do it all in your third-party application, but then you can manage the page through the CMS. So that's one option. Now, demo. So if you've really enjoyed this talk and you're like really eager to like get to know Django CMS, you can go to django-cms.org, and I'm going to do that like right now because I'm pushing my luck. And damn it, I did not connect to the Wi-Fi. Okay, I am not going to do that now. I've pushed it too far. So yeah, if you go to demo.django-cms.org, you're going to be asked if you're a robot. If you are not, then just pick the box. And you're going to get a 15-minute demo of the CMS. It's going to look exactly like what I have here. Like, it's going to be exactly the same thing, but it's only going to last for 15 minutes. You can delete any page, modify all the content you want, because at the end, after 15 minutes, it's going to expire, and then it's just going to recreate another one. So feel free to try it out. And if you want to try it out for longer, you can sign up for Divio Cloud. Then it's free. You don't have to pay anything for the sign up, and you can have a staging site for free forever. So you can play with the CMS as long as you like. And only if you were to want to go public with your site, like publish it, then we would charge you. Yeah, that'll be all. Thank you very much. Questions?
I have a question.
Oh boy.
Is it only web only, or can you go mobile?
The editing interface is mobile, yes. So there's no offline mode, if that's what you're asking.
But I mean, like, can you create like mobile applications or only websites?
Aha. No mobile applications at the moment. We're working on a REST API to be able to integrate with mobile, but it's not ready yet. Yes?
Can it generate static pages?
All pages will be dynamic because they're all handled by one single view in the CMS, but you could cache it. You could also just generate the page. I've seen this before, where you generate the page and grab the output HTML and just save it to a file and then just render that. Yes?
When you mentioned third-party applications, is that strictly Django applications, or is it any web-based application?
It would, do you mean to integrate with the CMS? Yeah, it would have to be more Django applications. Yes?
And going to production is similar to the Django application?
Sorry,
And going to production?
going to production?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's exactly the same thing as any other Django application. It works the same way. Yes.
In terms of the appearance of a website, can you publish custom themes, and how difficult is that? Can I compare it to WordPress, where I select the theme and change the whole?
Yeah, we actually have these like boilerplates where there are different themes like Bootstrap 3 and all sorts of themes like that. But that's actually more at the Django level, because Django CMS itself doesn't really it doesn't do anything with how your site looks. So it's really up to you how you configure your templates, your CSS, and all that stuff.
In terms of security, how does it compare to the other CMS?
Well, so far, I think the last security thing we had was like 7 months ago, so I think we're doing pretty good. If there is any, we handle it the same way as Django. If there is any security issue, it goes to the security mailing list where only a few have access, and then we don't release it until we have a patch ready and all that. So it's pretty much the same. Good. Thank you.